if someone was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist.
CBC is refusing to let a reporter quit? I'm sorry, what? The public meltdown of this has definitely exposed a lot more than just bias. And what does it mean to be an extremist in Canada? Well, the RCMP has all of the answers, being, just super experts in extremism, clearly, in a case that actually does not really add up when you look at the details. But hey, details are not going to take away from a very good narrative to be driven home. I'm Jasmine Lane. Be sure to subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below. And of course, share this video if anything in it helps you learn something new. And Donald Trump made an announcement that, if you think it hurts now, just wait. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated.
The answer to every government problem is not creating a new position or creating additional layers of bureaucracy. But one of the things we have noted is the lack of accountability in federal procurement. So ultimately, who will be accountable for ushering us through this important period of change? And that person has to be the Chief Procurement Officer. This position has to be created at the highest level of government, and it has to have the singular focus of federal procurement and improving the processes that currently exist. They need to be an agent of change. There is a cultural shift that's required in federal procurement. We have done the same things for far too long.
We've done the same things. Like what? To give money to our friends, our lobbyists, the people who we know are going to support us and have our backs. Yeah, it sounds a lot like corruption to me. My goodness. It's one of those things, though, and it's why I'm so anti-big government in general. But I got to be careful saying that, because I might end up, arrested and charged with a terror plot, according to CBC, which we will get into in just a little bit here. But in terms of big government, the number one issue is that it allows corruption to thrive for exactly those reasons. There is no accountability because there's too many chains of command. And even when there is some remote aspects of accountability, you have things like this. This is taken from Blacklock's reporter. Remember Justin Trudeau's $63 million Arrive scam app during the pandemic? An internal investigation looking into the scandal and spending has now had its records sealed by a federal judge. So all of that information that was once public knowledge, now that they're going through and investigating themselves because, you done goofed up, they have officially sealed that. And hey, Canada is one of the least transparent nations amongst the G7 countries. I think we're second last, actually, in the developing world or developed world. So no surprise here that Canadians, you don't need to know what's going on.
Our office annually publishes a top 10 list of procurement issues that we see across a variety of stakeholders. Those stakeholders include suppliers, federal buyers, the general public, politicians. And there is a certain static, repetitive nature of those top 10 issues. And so at a certain point, we looked at ourselves and said, what are we doing as an office to make those improvements ourselves? So the reason for the lack of accountability is the bifurcated nature of the federal procurement system. Having someone who sits atop the system with those responsibilities specifically identified is critical to the success. And that's why I talk about it first, because this position will ultimately be responsible for implementation of the subsequent issues that I'm going to be addressing. The second one is vendor performance management. So I apologize to those of you who have heard me speak in the past, because this is something I've been speaking about for years. And I really hope the attention is now. Vendor performance management is something so basic that the average Canadian understands the concept. If you were to hire a plumber to fix a leak in your kitchen, and that plumber arrived 2 hours late and brought the wrong tools, what are the chances that that average Canadian is going to be using that plumber in a subsequent need? The answer is they're not, right? That's a simple decision that the Canadian taxpayer is able to make. Now, in the federal procurement context, the problem is even more acute than that.
And when you have a nation that pays some of the highest taxes in the world, that has some of the highest costs for things in the world, or increasing costs for things, some of the worst inflation, and when I'm saying world, I'm specifically referring to developed nations, it's no wonder that there's so many Canadians who are just sick and tired of being abused. We are sick and tired of being treated like this. And as the Financial Post wrote, there is a growing wave of successful, high-earning, affluent Canadians who are fleeing the country. And the reason why is because they're driven by economic uncertainty, housing costs, political dissatisfaction, high taxes, and departure tax filings have absolutely skyrocketed in recent years. Canada has this really fun thing where they don't want you to be able to afford to live here, and then they also want you to sacrifice your firstborn in order to leave. If you're a Canadian citizen and you are emigrating out of the country, you get taxed on stocks, crypto even, shares in private companies, art, intellectual property. The only things that aren't taxed is if you have a house here because that you still own, you won't be taxed on that. Your TFSAs, your pension, RRSPs, that sort of stuff. And as of June 25th, 2024, last summer, the inclusion rate increased to 66.67% for gains over $250,000. And then $250 and under is taxed at 50%. Isn't that insane? Plus, if you don't plan properly, maybe you miss something while you're doing it because they make it so gosh darn impossible to leave this place, you could face penalties of up to $2,500 per form. But despite that, in 2025, Q1, a 3% increase year over year, by the way, this was actually the second largest outflow on record, with 27,100 Canadians leaving permanently. And the fact that even wealthy Canadians who are calculating the math and they're figuring out that even after the departure tax, which is a lot, as we discussed, the net benefit of moving out of the country to somewhere that is perhaps a tax-free state like Tennessee or Texas is very compelling, and it's actually worth it. And the whole tax the rich mentality is just so foolish and short-sighted for that very reason, because it sounds super righteous, right? It's an envy tax. You want to tax people that you're jealous of because you think you deserve what they worked hard for. That's insane. And it's also, wow, how politically convenient to punish success while ignoring spending abuse and systemic inefficiency. You definitely do not create a stronger economy, a stronger middle class by punishing and chasing out the people who are providing those jobs, who are investing in innovation, who already pay the vast majority of taxes in this country. You do not feed the village by shooting the farmer. I came across this on That's Politics, which is a YouTube channel. Their host, Michael Harrison, actually interviewed Dan McTeague, who I was just texting this morning to get him on this show as well. And what he had to say, I think brilliantly summarized just the absolute failures and why. Why exactly did Canada go this far?
Cost of $16 and $17, they rescued Europe, and they are big suppliers to markets in Asia who would otherwise be burning coal. So Canada missed an opportunity because of significant political virtue signaling and being captive to an audience, particularly the climate audience, the green audience, that basically said the world's coming to an end and we're all going to burn up, which is bunk and baloney. Most of those people should have their charitable status revoked, but that's another matter for another day. The reality is that it's 15% of your GDP, and without it,
right.
As my grandfather said, you have got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of.
And God bless Alberta, because wowza, their leaders are doing some awesome things as far as I can tell. So their municipal affairs minister, Dan Williams, has been advising municipalities to stay in their lane. He actually cautioned cities like Edmonton and Calgary against woke initiatives, such as, plastic straw bans or licensing body rub parlors and legal brothels or DEI programs, because every single one of those things is a distraction. And why do they do that? Oh, right, to trigger emotion, right? So that they can get votes. That's why they do that, because It's fine that our roads are falling apart in some communities. It's fine that we haven't done anything about our wastewater. That's all fine, because we're just going to make sure that you're focused on all of this other nonsense that doesn't actually matter. We don't want you to be focused on the things that we should actually be doing with your tax dollars. We want to trigger that feeling inside of you that makes you feel like you're virtuous or you're standing up for a good cause by electing us with these socially driven policies that don't actually matter.
And why do you think the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau was so adamant about containing the oil and gas industry? Yes, they bought a pipeline, and we keep hearing that by the way. Oh, well, we bought a pipeline for Alberta, so they just should shut their mouths at this point. But I think you have a very different take on it.
Well, I'm from Ontario, so I've not really, had much interest in what happens in Alberta, but I do realize this energy sector creates jobs, prosperity, revenue for myself here in Ontario, for my children here in Ontario, for our standard of living here in Ontario, and that, by the way, extends to Quebec and Atlantic Canada. So anybody who has any doubts as to how important that is, but I don't think Albertans really care about that. I think the point is that the Liberal Party veered off to the far left after the 2011 election, which of course I fell. I was ranked number 34 in the party of the 80 or 90 seats that we had at the time. I wound up losing by 900 votes. That's because the Liberal Party and the NDP under Jack Layton had really gone to the far left. And part of the far left was adopting the green noise, the green nonsense. The world was going to end as we knew it. The Arctic would no longer have any ice. There's all sorts of, there would be flooding, and catastrophe would happen because of Canada producing 1.5% of the 0.04% of the Earth's atmosphere that's made up of human emissions. That's a little bit like a speck on a bridge here in Ontario at the Burlington Skyway, and ripping the whole Skyway down because you believe that that's the way it goes. But the Liberal Party bought this message, and it was aided and abetted by the United Nations, the various climate summits that they have every year, in which Canada sends tens of thousands of people over the past 20 years to these gabfests to come out to find creative ways to fleece the public in order to make them feel bad about giving money to the rest of the world, and that Canada should somehow be holding itself out as responsible for any type of deviation in the weather. And that's what we're talking about, weather. We're not talking climate. They use that as a ruse. We also, of course, saw a Liberal Party that tended to forsake or turn its back on the building of things like pipelines, putting onerous obligations on pipeline developers. Even after we approved one, Trans Mountain Pipeline being an example, Kinder Morgan came in and said, "We're going to build this. It'll cost about $6 billion, Canada. You'll pay nothing for it. It'll get your oil moving." But the Canadian government refused to stand up for its own signature, for its own approval process, and allowed every Tom, Dick, and Harry nut job organization out there to attack it and to create a minority of Indigenous groups to come up to oppose the majority of Indigenous groups that were in favor of this. And then you had the previous premier for British Columbia saying, "We'll use every tool in the toolbox." What did it cost? Well, Kinder Morgan had a class 1 example of how to sue the federal government. They were going to sue the pants off the federal government. The federal government knew that. That's why they bought it for $6 billion. And then had to add another $32 billion of taxpayers' money in order to get the project completed, because it was in the country's national interest. So, yeah, I mean, say this for Alberta, the hell it was for the rest of the country. And the rest of the country has been saddled with a debt thanks to the greedy opportunists on the green side who don't like to disclose the fact these are charities that do not do charitable work, but in fact are political agitators. And while we may allow that under our laws, it's had a devastating impact on the Canadian economy. It's destroyed our international reputation as far as investment is concerned.
But Mark Carney says we're going to diversify our trading partners. Canada's working so gosh darn hard for all of that, right? Ooh, yeah, it doesn't actually look like Canada is, but Danielle Smith of Alberta is. She writes, big news from the Alberta Korea office from across the Pacific. 550,000 barrels of Alberta heavy oil just arrived at Hyundai's Oil Banks Dason, I pronounced that wrong, refinery. A proud milestone for Alberta and a powerful sign of Canada and Korea's energy partnership in action. It sounds like something the Prime Minister should have done. No, I'm happy Danielle Smith did it, but boy, for a lot of talk, Mark Carney has not given us anything. at all, actually, now that I think about it, outside of maybe a few good laughs. So we had covered this 2 days ago. Danielle Smith and Doug Ford had signed a deal to study new energy corridors, among a couple of other things. And Mark Carney actually just chimed in a couple days late on this one from vacation, right? Yeah. He says the premiers are right on. Canada has what the world needs, and we need to get back into the business of exporting it to new markets. We're building one united Canadian economy, and there's more to come. I have a feeling he didn't actually watch the press conference, though, so here's a little reminder.
We need the federal government to cut red tape and bring regulatory certainty so Canada can attract the kind of private sector investments that will be critical to build this energy and trade infrastructure. No one will build a pipeline to Tidewaters if there's a ban on tankers. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard, a ban on tankers. No one will invest in opening a mine if it takes 15 years to get it to yes. It's time to end excuses, and it's time to start building, and we need to start building now.
Yeah, nobody's going to, and people aren't, as proven by data, which is why the Liberal government just wants to subsidize you into needing them, right, in order to get anything done, because that's the solution. Wacky. Either way, this article came out from the Fraser Institute saying that Canada needs to immediately scrap its foolish EV mandate. And despite the fact that consumers, Canadians, don't want EVs, aren't buying EVs, can't afford them, and also face not at all the appropriate infrastructure for this plan to come into effect. In 2035 sounds far away, sure, but that's only for when it's 100% of a mandate. It actually comes into effect in a few months of it being just a portion of the mandate, which is just absolutely absurd. Take a drive around your neighborhood. Tell me how many charging infrastructure devices you see. Yeah, the answer is not very many, if any, at all. So Ottawa's 2035 EV mandate is not green leadership, as though that's going to do anything other than line the pockets of Brookfield Asset Management. It is just a technocratic fantasy that forces consumers into tech that they don't want. Does that sound like democracy? It sure doesn't to me. It also burdens the grid with massive infrastructure demands and subsidizes the wealthy at the expense of the average Canadian. Yeah. Weird, isn't it? How they are so adamant about keeping that policy in place. I wonder why.
They write, news media, talking about Canada, continue to benefit from public funding. How much did you adore that line, Peter?
Oh, I loved it. Why not, right? Like it's amazing. Thinking, 10 years ago, the idea of taking public subsidy within media was anathema. It was just like, no, that would never happen. And now it's celebrated, right? With the terminology. Also, the author of the Canadian part is the chair of the committee at CRA that approves which Canadian news outlets qualify for funding. So there's no objection anymore. Everybody's just rolled through, and within 10 years completely shifted the moral foundation upon which Canadian journalism stands. And it's quite remarkable to see. But yeah, it's cheerful. Yeah, hey, they can benefit from public funding, right? Like, rather than they benefit from, public readership, right? Or something like that. It's kind of cool. Like once you're subsidized, why would you change, right? Like there's no incentive whatsoever or there's a less and less incentive, because there is still some incentive for sure to serve the reader when you can get your money for nothing.
Switching gears into some drama coming out of the CBC and mainstream media in particular, which your tax dollars largely pay for, by the way. You may have heard earlier this week, Travis Dunraj had publicly resigned. He had a pretty scathing, detailed letter where he blasted CBC's culture of tokenism, ideological control, censorship, and CBC's response to that was saying that he's actually on leave. He didn't quit. He's still an employee, even though he wrote a letter of resignation and announced he was resigning, but they're just not letting him, I guess, maybe because it makes them look bad. I don't know. I'm assuming this is probably some sort of a legal tactic to try to fire him for cause or discredit his claims before he actually files a lawsuit, and maybe even puts in a complaint to Canadian Human Rights Commission based on his treatment and the control and censorship and whatnot. So this is definitely starting to give hostage situations, not human resource situations. And his lawyer actually did confirm that there is a lawsuit coming, and it really just appears that CBC is absolutely scrambling over themselves to try to cover up whatever they can legally. However, the damage is absolutely done because Canadians have been watching this play out for the last couple of days. And while there is certainly more of this story to be told and coming out, I'll just kind of leave it like this. You absolutely do not reject a resignation unless you are trying to protect something. And in this case, it's not your integrity. It's probably your power.
Well, radicalization in general quite often will show by people isolating themselves and changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. Like, and if someone you know was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist. But we also have to remember that having the most extremist views is perfectly legal in Canada, and that it's only acting with violence to prove that view that becomes a criminal offense.
You heard that, right? I don't even have words. Holy shit. Yikes. Wow. Okay, so let's just kind of go through this story. It broke earlier today that there are 3 men charged with facilitating terrorist activity, which is an extremely serious federal offense, even though, you know, they're let into our country from other countries all the time without actually being checked. Anyway, RCMP says that this group of individuals were scouting for recruits and that they had been planning something to seize land near Quebec City, and that they were also training for ambushes. There was another man who was arrested. He had 83 pew-pews, 16 explosives, like devices, and 11,000 rounds of ammo. But what land and for what purpose, and what was their actual plan? I don't know. They are saying that they were practicing survival skills, navigation, firearms drills. That sounds to me like they were just practicing for work, maybe. I don't know. So was this actually some delusional fringe group with fantasies of insurrection? Were they actually capable or wanting to pull anything like this off? Or were they just LARPing in the woods or practicing for work or just having fun with their friends? I have no idea. This story right now is just all over the headlines. But there's a lot of missing information here and a lot of very intentional, I'm sure, terms that are used. So the RCMP will not confirm which members are active in the military. They say that some of the individuals charged are. Why on earth would you withhold that information? Do Canadians not deserve to know who in our own military is infiltrated by radicals? Why is the public left guessing about something so serious that you are alleging? And also, we have seen the weaponization of the word terrorist, where it's used to discredit people, truckers, dissidents, protesters. You see that all the freaking time. So are these men actually domestic terrorists? Or are they just, using that term again to create some fear? Because if the threat is real, show us. And if not, stop using the label to justify censorship, to scare the crowd, and to expand your surveillance. And the timing of this, too, is just really, really something. Because this case dropped right around the same period of time that faith in national security agencies is at an all-time low. I wonder why. And if this is a genuine law enforcement success, why are details so vague? That leads me to feel as though this may or may not be a PR move to kind of distract from political failures. And of course, in the news reporting of this, it's an Instagram page that these guys were using. Yeah, they were trying to recruit people on Instagram. What an awesome way to ramp up the rhetoric about radical right-wing extremism. We need to censor you on the internet because of your safety. We're here to protect you. It just fits the narrative a little bit too perfectly with, again, absolutely no details other than, according to the RCMP, apparently believing in traditional values or learning or waking up from the narrative means that you might be an extremist. What on earth is wrong with this country and the people who lead it? This is sick. I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more to report on this story tomorrow, but I don't want to make this video too long. I know attention spans are short, so we'll put this one on the back burner. I definitely have more thoughts on it, but nonetheless, that is the news that we have as of today. I'm Jasmine Elaine. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below, and share this video, as that will help us hopefully have a dominance over the CBC one day. That would be very nice. I will talk to you tomorrow.